Sugarcane Alley is a curious film in that it employs a fairly conventional aesthetic, one that sometimes seems to constrain its immensely rich subject of life in the cane fields of Martinique. The film is often staged, shot, and edited with the expository simplicity of a television program. Nonetheless, there are moments, like this one, where the acting, the dialogue, and the setting combine to create a moment that just feels unmistakably genuine. This actor, Dutta Sek, who plays a galvanizing patriarch to the film's young protagonist, has a voice that uncannily resembles my grandfather's.
Ça c'est quoi?
When I was in college, my grandfather bought me my first video camera. I was visiting my grandparents for a whole month in Taiwan, and he wanted me to preserve our time together. So for a whole month, I followed them through Taiwan, from the shores of placid Sun Moon Lake to the cliffs of the Taroko Gorge to the 9 Aboriginal tribes mountain theme park. Wherever they went, I would follow with the camera. And to this day, I still have all this footage of the backs of my grandparents as they walk through cities, streets, parks, and alleyways. After watching my footage, my grandfather had one piece of advice: always shoot people from the front. But I kind of like it that you see things from their perspective, like a Lara Croft video game. Anyone who's seen the Dardenne Brothers movie The Sun knows what I'm talking about.
Tout ce qui appartient à la création a son secret. La terre a un secret. L'eau a un secret. Le feu a un secret. La vie.
It was during this trip that my grandfather revealed to me that he and my grandmother raised me for the first 3 years of my life. My parents had sent me to stay there while they toiled away in the U.S., facing the challenges of life as immigrants and as a married couple. For this reason, I feel like I have a special bond with my grandparents, except that it's a bond that's extremely fragile, since they can't speak English, and I have problems speaking Mandarin, a condition I ascribe to growing up listening to my parents yell at each other in that language. Even after studying Chinese for 3 years in college, I could barely communicate with them when I stayed for a whole month. We spent a lot of time just watching television together, and I'd constantly ask them questions about what people were saying, while telling myself, if I just pick up one word or phrase every 10 minutes, I'll be fluent by the end of the month. But by the final week, I was wanting to stay in my room to avoid the strain of talking. I'm sure my grandparents saw this trip as an opportunity to say everything they had to say to me, and they were just as anxious and exhausted of not being able to communicate with me as I was with them. I still have all these videotapes of my grandfather giving impromptu speeches on a variety of subjects. It's been years since I reviewed them, but I remember one being about all the innovations that the Chinese gave to the world, from paper and gunpowder to the netting that you put on the food on the dining table to keep away flies. I guess he was particularly anxious about me losing my Chineseness, and try as I might to reassure them that I'll always be Chinese, I suppose that what they saw and heard wasn't all that reassuring.
Mon fils, il faut laisser la création régler ses affaires elle-même. Et quand ça arrive, il faut savoir accepter ces mouvements de la création, sans pleurs, sans cris, puisque de toute façon c'est une bonne chose.
My mom would regularly chide me to call my grandparents. But when I did call, my grandparents would say goodbye after only a couple of minutes, usually by saying that they knew how expensive the call was and didn't want to inconvenience me. Or were they really just afraid of the anxiety of communicating?
Petit garçon, oublie ton nom, mais oublie jamais ça.
Eventually, my mom stopped giving me reminders to call, and now it's been 3 years. Watching this scene, I feel like I have to make that call.